The National Cathedral, it was supposed to be that one symbol that united all religions, all Ghanaians, regardless of which tribe or religion you belong to. But in the last few weeks, it's turning out to be the very opposite of that. If for anything, it's rather dividing than uniting because of key questions of transparency and accountability. And so, if you're building God's house, you build it on the altar of transparency and accountability or without transparency or accountability. There are many who will say what is happening currently amounts to building God's house without transparency and accountability. But the question really tonight to ask is, this is what it should be, building it with transparency and accountability. And we've heard a lot in the last few weeks, revelations from Okudzeto Ablakwa, leaked documents, finance minister speaking, the secretariat speaking. Of course, now we're learning of a resignation, a high-profile resignation from the Board of Trustees of the National Cathedral project. And so let's get into this. I want to speak to the clergy. I want to speak to the members of the Christian fraternity, the leadership of the Christian fraternity. I wonder what they make of all this. This was supposed to be the thing that they rally around in building God's house. Do they still feel as attached to this? Do they also want the same transparency and accountability? Are they asking themselves the same questions? We'll get into that when we speak to my guests who are joining me. So we now know this was supposed to be, at the time it was first mooted in 2017, it was supposed to be $100 million. The whole project was supposed to cost that. When the finance minister updated us over the weekend when he spoke on GTV's Talking Point, he gave a figure, which is 350 million cedi. That's what it's going to cost to build a National Cathedral. That is equivalent to 2.8 billion cedi. So that's a significant amount of money. And the fundamental question that has been asked when you consider this amount, at a time when the economy is in crisis, should this be a priority? If you ever go to the IMF, the last time we went to the IMF, we went to the IMF for a little under $1 billion. Just over $900 million we went for. And if you think about it, 350 million, it's almost a quarter of that. So this is a significant amount of money that will do a lot for this economy that is in crisis, right? The government is looking for money and looking to borrow and struggling to raise enough, even domestically, to shore up the city. They're struggling to raise this even when it comes to the borrowing on the local market, right? They're trying to raise some 750 million cedis on the domestic. So this is a lot of money to spend for a poor country in the midst of an economic crisis, struggling on a daily basis to meet its basic needs at that level. So that's why the questions are being asked, and rightly so. Whether considering where we are as a country, if you dreamed this up in 2017 when the economy was rebounding, doing well, yeah, it's okay. But considering that times have changed and this crisis we are in is going to linger for so long, for years to come, and maybe only tapering off after 2015, 2025, it may even get worse. Is this the most prudent use of the resources now at this time? Or should we pause and rechannel these resources into stabilizing the economy? If you pump this money right now into the system, it will go a long way to try and stabilize the city, which is depreciating, right? So those are the fundamental questions that have been asked on the back of the revelation of the cost of the National Cathedral. And so the key question then had become, so how is government going to fund this? And I make that point knowing that at the beginning, the assurances were, well, government was going to play a very minimal role in this, and the clergy, the Christian community, was going to take the bulk of the load when it comes to funding. But in 2019, the finance minister went to the cabinet and made a point. He told Ghanaians that the state will be facilitating this process by providing land, the secretariat, seed money for the preparatory phase. So that is the parameters, the explicit confines within which the government was going to operate. Land, secretariat, seed money for preparatory phase. As we know now, based on documents that have been leaked so far, and the finance ministry has defended it, an estimated 200 million has been released. So you could say that that is a seed money that went to, because we've already given out the land and the secretary has been established. But the question that I'm being asked is, so what is the limit? When they say seed money, what is the limit? If it's 200 million cedis now, is that it? Or we intend to release more? That is a key question that we are asking tonight, and many have asked. So let's have clarity. Let's have some transparency in the release of the funds. And the key question, did Parliament explicitly approve this? Of course, this was in the budget, but did the Finance Ministry go to Parliament to say, yes, we want to provide seed money, but we want to provide X amount of seed money, and then Parliament approved it? That's the question that I've been asked. The Finance Minister says, this in the budget is enough, because you approve the concept in the budget. Once you approve the concept, then of course, you're giving me the free hand to spend, which is exactly what they're doing. But the question's there. And this quote in that budget has also come into play now, because the Finance Minister expressed the President's determination that the building of the National Cathedral will not put, quote, undue financial burdens on the state. That is the operative phrase is undue financial burden. Question is, land, secretariat, 200 million. By the way, the 200 million is all, that's what we know, because that's what the leaked documents suggest or say. What else don't we know? How much more has gone that we're not told? Because until the leaks happened, we didn't know that as much as 200 million had been spent. So there's a fundamental question to be asked. How much have we spent to date? And does it meet the President's own criteria of not placing undue financial burden? So if it's 200 million, is that undue financial burden or is it not? It's a key question that we need to ask, because they've indicated that they're going to do this, and they're going to do this to ensure that it does not place undue financial burden on the state. And in there is the admission that the state is determined not to carry the full load, not to carry the bulk of the burden, but the majority of it will go to others, private sector contributions and contribution from the churches. Okay. Now, and again, in that budget, still budget, he has therefore proposed a partnership. So that's how they're going to do this. A partnership between the state and the Ghanaian Christian community, both at home and the diaspora. A partnership. Tonight we're going to explore that partnership, right? Is this partnership still working? Because someone said, if this partnership was still working, then the state will not have to do a lot. And the Finance Minister will not be justifying why it's okay to spend so much of the taxpayers' money on this. So is there a problem with this partnership between the state and the Ghanaian Christian community? So I'm talking to the leaders of the Christian community. They are on my show tonight. We'll explore this in a bit more when they join. What is the partnership like? What fruits have the partnership yielded in building the National Cathedral? We'll come to that question when they join us. And so let's break down the funds as have been released so far from the leaked document. So one of the key documents that, again, Samokudu Tablako had leaked was 25 billion that had been released. I've talked about that earlier. And he had raised a few other additional questions. That the project has now stalled, and indeed we've seen letters from the project managers laying off workers, the casual workers, the laborers who are actually doing the actual work of building. They've been laid off. And in that letter we've seen, and Samokudu Tablako, the ranking on the Foreign Affairs Committee leaked, in that letter the project managers say because of funds, they haven't been given enough funds, and so they have to let. So this has happened in March. So since March, it appears the project has stalled. Why? Is it because this partnership may be not working as it should? We'll ask that question. And then he says contractors haven't been paid, because one of the contractors had, of course, complained. Owners of the demolished properties have also not been compensated. But we know tonight that one of the owners of the private property that got affected, had to be demolished to make way for the National Cathedral, had been given a 1.26 acre plot in the same Ridge residential area as replacement for what they lost in that same vicinity. Now, Samokudu Tablako tells me tonight on Top Story on radio that that company in question has not been able to occupy and take possession of that property because there's controversy. And it's been 2 years since they were given access to that land, and there are issues that they're fighting with some government elements on there. That's an allegation that is made on as far as this is concerned. Now, this is the case of Waterstone Realty Limited, and they were asking for a compensation of $6.5 million for what had happened to them when their properties were affected by this. The company has served the government a notice since the 4th of November 2021 about their intent to proceed to court because they've been given the right to access the land to replace, but they can't access it now 2 years on because of all the issues that have cropped up. And then we dug into this debate. So trying to understand the funding model that was to back the construction from the onset. And Dr. Kwabena Opuni-Frimpong in 2017 was the General Secretary of the Christian Council at the time the concept of the National Cathedral was first conceived. And he said something very instructive to us recently, as last week. He says, our understanding of this National Cathedral have had a conversation with the Minister for Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Kofi Jamesi, and my understanding is that it is the churches that are going to build this National Cathedral. It was clear to us that at the early stages in 2017, that's what they were told. They were told by the Chieftaincy Minister very specifically that the churches were going to build it. Okay, so he's a bit surprised that government appears to be taking the lead role now. So that's him at that time in his point. And then he goes on to make a point, and a very important point, in the wake of all the controversy, challenging the trustees to come forward and offer some clarity. Because many of the trustees are his colleagues, members of the clergy, like leaders of the Christian community. He challenged them, come forward and offer some clarity. Because if you're building God's house and there's all this controversy, almost bordering on a scandal, you really don't want that associated with building of a God's house. And he was challenging them to do so. Now, however, on the back of this, then we hear this week that one of the most prominent members of the Board of Trustees for the National Cathedral, Dr. Mensah Otabil, who is a general overseer of the International Central Gospel Church, has himself resigned, as far back from what I understand, a year ago from the Board of Trustees of the National Cathedral. That raised a lot of questions. It raised a lot of questions. And the question fundamentally goes to, and listen, in the last 24 hours, before the last 24 hours, although he's resigned, his picture and image and name were still on the National Cathedral website as a trustee. Following the controversy in the last few days that he's resigned, we know there's pressure had been brought to bear, and the Secretariat for the National Cathedral have been forced to pull down his image and name from the page. You need to ask the question, what really spooked Dr. Mensah Otabil to the point where he had to resign from the trustees, from the Board of Trustees? What spooked him so badly that he needed to resign? What was it? We don't know, right? But what was it that spooked him that he had to resign from the board? To the point that he didn't only resign, they had to make sure that his image and name had nothing to do with the building of the cathedral anymore. There's a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions there that his resignation and the subsequent pulling down of his image and name raises. And it comes down to what spooked him. Did anything spook him? What was it that got him to resign? Such a prominent, high-profile, most respected members of the clergy. So, but there are few members of the clergy who still remain as trustees. There were 13 of them. 12 still remain, right? And if you go to the website of the National Cathedral, until 24 hours ago, in fact, overnight, that's when Pastor Mensah Otabil's name was removed, right? If you went there yesterday in the afternoon, you will find Mensah Otabil's name and picture there, but that has been removed now. So these men of God remain there. We have the Apostle Professor Pokunyina, chairman of the Church of Pentecost, there as the chairperson. You have the vice chair, that's Bishop Charles Palmer Buckle, Metropolitan Catholic Archbishop Cape Coast, there. You have Most Reverend Bishop Justice Ofea Krofi, Anglican Bishop Emeritus member. He's a member of the trustees. You have Reverend Professor Imam Mate, former moderator of the Presbyterian Church. He's still a member of the Board of Trustees for the National Cathedral. Then you have Most Reverend T.K. Awoche Pratt. He's the presiding bishop of the Methodist Church. He's a member. You have Reverend Professor Cephas Amenyo. He's a moderator of the Presbyterian Church, a member. Archbishop Nicholas Duncan Williams, President, Archbishop and General Overseer of the Action Chapel International, a member. You have Reverend Dr. Joyce Ayi, Executive Director, Salt and Light Ministries, a member of the trustees, still there. We have Bishop Dakiwad Mills, Presiding Bishop, Lighthouse Group of Churches, a member. Reverend Eastwood Anaba, Founding and President of the Eastwood Anaba Ministries, a member, still there. Reverend Victor Kusi Boateng, Founder of the Power Chapel Worldwide. He's a member and secretary to the trustees. And Reverend Dr. Frimpong Manso, General Superintendent, Assemblies of God member, still as a member of the trustees. So although Dr. Mensah Otabil is gone, these men of God, clergymen, still remain on the trustees. Now, a few things we've learned tonight, trying to pick up a few of the details from those close to the trustees who still remain. They feel deeply saddened by the controversy happening. Some of them believe that the politics that has been brought into this, the politicization of the National Cathedral, is destroying this country. But they also acknowledge that their reputations are at stake. And so what we understand is that they will be issuing a statement. They want to collectively come together, gather all the facts, and issue a statement that will clarify some of the issues, in fact, all the issues. And that is why they haven't spoken yet from amongst those who remain. And some have suggested that some of them may be considering to pull away from the trustees as well, like Mensah Otabil had done. We don't have information on that, but what we can tell you is that they feel, they know, they've heard what is happening, they are concerned about it, and they're preparing to come out in a statement that will clarify the issues on this. So that's where we are with the National Cathedral and what we know. So the conversation we must have is, how do you build God's house and ensure that in doing so, there is transparency and there is accountability? We're speaking to the men of God who are joining me right now for that conversation, some of the leaders of the Christian fraternity. Remember, there's supposed to be a partnership between state and the Christian community for this to happen. Let's hear from the Christian community, the leaders of the Christian community, on the back of everything that's happened. After the break, we'll hear them. Stay with me. Thank you very much for staying with us here on PM Express. My guest joining me, we're expecting to be joined shortly by the General Secretary of the Christian Council of Ghana, Dr. Cyril Fayose. Also joining me right now on Zoom is the chairman of the Advocates for Christ Ghana, and he's also an anti-corruption campaigner, so come to this conversation with both hearts. I want to hear his thoughts on the transparency question, seeing that he's himself as a chair of Advocates for Christ. Bishop Fred Crunchy Mensah is the presiding bishop and general overseer of the Transformation Assembly Church. Thank you very much, and he joins us in the studio on this. Adam, Senator, let me start with you. I mean, Advocates for Christ. Are you an advocate for the National Cathedral?
Well, I would take this from the personal perspective and say that, yes, I am. I am intrigued by a president who wants to do something for God, and I believe that this is a vision that is worth supporting if it's done right. So, yes.
Okay. Bishop, you are an advocate for the National Cathedral?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Why?
Unfortunately not. My brother, I believe that the scripture says there is time for everything. I believe that Ghana has a lot of Christians. I think by the books, over 70% are Christians. The church has contributed so much to national development in the health sector, education, socially, morally. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with building a national cathedral. But I believe that the timing is not right. There are other pressing issues that we can put money into. I saw the cost of this building. I think the finance minister first came out to say it's $100 million. Later, they came to correct it, and they said it's now $200 million.
In fact, now, based on what he told Talking Point over the weekend, it's $350 million.
No. That's over 2 billion Ghana cedis.
It's 2.8 billion cedis.
Okay. I think that we can put that in other things. You see, a national cathedral is not bad. It's a national symbol. I mean, it will help Christianity. It will help in building people's lives. But not when our areas are flooding, not when people are hard-pressed, not when we're being squeezed to pay taxes on almost everything, not when prices of things are rising up through the roof. I think that it shouldn't be our priority now. It should not be. Moreover, I understand that this is a personal pledge by our dear president to build a cathedral for God if he wins the election. How does it become a national burden? If it is an individual that made that pledge, there's nothing wrong with it. But I think that the timing is absolutely not right. Because in the Old Testament, I mean, David was so fascinated about building a temple for God. Solomon was so consumed with that vision.
The president is consumed too.
Yes, because, you see, under the Old Covenant, God lived in buildings. So a temple was a necessity. We needed to build a temple for him to dwell in. But under the New Covenant, the Bible says that God lives in men. So if you want to build for God, why don't you build lives? Why don't you put that money into lives? Why don't you look at people, focus on people, and take care of people? I think God will be more pleased with that, because God does not live in temples anymore. Temples are important, but I am the temple of God. So why do you put the money into a building and I go hungry?
So you're saying that if Jesus was standing here today, he would not be pleased that we're spending $350 million on a temple for him and his father?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at this time of our development. Not at this stage. Of course, nations like the UK, United States of America, other nations have built cathedrals. But at what point of their development did they build those cathedrals? We are not there yet. I don't think that should be a national priority. No, I don't think so.
Adam Senanu, you are an advocate. You said the bishop is not. Do you agree with his point?
Well, obviously the bishop has points. I mean, essentially, he's agreed with me. He's saying that, I mean, it's a good thing to do, except that he thinks the timing is wrong. A number of points. One, I mean, in 2 Samuel 7, when David wanted to build a place, he had found a point of rest, he was not fighting. The answer that Nathan the prophet told him was that, I mean, initially Nathan says that, well, whatever you think, go ahead with it. And at night, God spoke to him and said, you know what? I have not asked you to do a temple for me. I've been traveling around with the Israelites, and I'm in no hurry to have a temple built for me. But your offspring, I'll bring someone who will do that temple for you. So it's not accurate to say that in the Old Testament, God was always in the temple. I think it's accurate to say that the timing matters. And the question is the timing right now? The other question is this supposed to be a national agenda? And so there are issues. I think that this ought not to be a national agenda. The president had given us a certain vision, which initially, as far as we all understood, had to do with the Christian community. I think if we stuck with the basics and principles, this would have been something that would not have gotten into controversy. Not forgetting the fact that we have some of the finest Christian leaders as part of this, and they must have a reason why they are still there. You can't have the Reverend Professor Poku Nyines and most Archbishop Palmer Barkel, Archbishop Duncan Williams, Reverend Iswiranaba. I think that there must be something about the information and how it's being managed. And I think that it's important that transparency and accountability be pursued in this matter. But as to whether the timing is right or not, reminds me of Gamaliel speaking to the Sanhedrin in Acts chapter 5, where he said, you know what, guys, hold on. If a thing is of God, it will succeed. But if it's of human origin, eventually we'll find that this thing will not be fulfilled. So we need to be cautious because the scriptures say, judge not. I think that if the president and his team will stick to the original plan and be very transparent and accountable with it, this is not something that was impossible. Perhaps they ought to be looking at the budget. Now that you're saying $350 million, that's a lot of money. They need to reconsider whether that's the level, whether we shouldn't look at something phased, something that still achieves the purpose without necessarily being
so for clarity, you agree the timing is wrong?
No, I don't know that the timing is wrong. Okay. I'm saying that to the extent that one looks at the budget and decides on something that is scaled to a point where it can be done and where it is not demanding extra resources from the state, this was something that could be achieved. So I'm trying to say that the factors go beyond just timing. It also is about the concept. What's the scope of work and why did they choose that scope of work? Would this have been cut down to a size where it is something that is feasible and that the Christian community could have run with? So there are more questions in terms of concept and design also that need to be answered, not just timing. And I'm saying that my brother, I mean, he may have good reasons, but we cannot categorically say that the timing is wrong, at least from my perspective.
So you're saying we should still build the National Cathedral now?
I don't know about a we. As I pointed out, the original concept was more like government will give a seed, the Christian community will do
it was supposed to be a partnership between the state and the Christian community. Specifically, the state, according to the 2019 budget, was going to provide land, a secretariat, and seed money. The president was clear that he was determined to ensure that the building, quote, will not put undue pressure on the taxpayer. That was the original concept.
And actually, that's the concept I'll stick with. Anything beyond that, I think that is untenable. I think that that is the concept that was sold to us. That's the concept that I bought into, because to the extent that you're not going to use state resources for this, to the extent that you're going to make sure that one did, a kind of projection that took on board what was feasible and pragmatic and pushed that through, I think that that was something that was achievable. And the question in my mind now is, how did they end up with 350 million? Why are we not having transparency on where the funding is coming from? So I'm saying if we stuck with the original plan, this was something that was achievable. I didn't see a problem with the timing either. I'll
come to you shortly on the transparency questions and the revelations we've learned, we've seen recently about the release of funds, the questions about transparency governing that. So stay with me, I'll come to that. We're also waiting to hear from Cyril Fayose with the General Secretary of the Christian Council. He makes a point that if the state, you talk about timing is an issue for you, Bishop, but he says if the state will simply take a back seat, and as the president says, the burden will go onto the Christian community to build, would you still support it?
I agree with him on that.
Okay.
I agree with him on that because I think that there are people in Ghana who are Christians who would also love to build a house for God, who have the resources. They can do it. So the problem I have is this thing being a burden on the taxpayer. I don't think it is right. It is absolutely wrong, especially at this time that everybody is bleeding. I do not think it is right. So if the Christian community is up to the task, why not?
But the challenge is, it's become very obvious now that partnership with the contribution of the Christian community hasn't been as forthcoming. So this was first mooted in 2017. We are in 2022. The work has stalled. The project manager has laid off workers because he's not been paid. It has forced the state, in the document we've seen, to now be releasing monies. Now we're in excess of 200 million cedis for it.
Okay.
That's where we are now. So clearly, that partnership isn't working, or we haven't seen the equivalent contribution from the Christian community. What's wrong there? Is it that the Christians themselves... Have you raised funds for this in your church?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I have not yet, let me say that.
But will you?
Maybe if I come to understand the reason for a cathedral at this time of our development, maybe I will. One of the reasons I haven't been so interested, you see, this issue is very sensitive, especially when there are very credible people on the board. So I'm careful the way I talk about it. But truth is truth. We cannot run away from it. I will keep saying the timing isn't good. One of the reasons a lot of Christians are not interested is that this whole thing, there is no much transparency in it.
Okay.
Because if you come and tell me that we have a project, it will cost us $100 million. And then in a couple of months, you come back to tell me 200, and now it has increased to $350. $350 million. I don't think that Christians will be so interested. And for me, one of the reasons I haven't contributed, and I'm not thinking of contributing as it stands now, is that I think that this should be a personal burden of our dear president. It shouldn't
How
be
do
a
you mean
statement.
personal burden?
Because I read somewhere that he went to Israel and made a pledge to God that if he wins the election, he is going to build a cathedral for God.
Yeah.
I don't think he did that as a president. At that time, he was a candidate. So it shouldn't be a national burden to begin with. I think that the president, if he wants to fulfill his promise to God, which is very important, he is strong enough to raise the fund.
Himself?
Himself.
So the president should go on a fundraising for himself?
He made the pledge.
Yeah.
So he can do that and then encourage the Christian community to help.
Okay, stay with me. Let me bring in Reverend Fayose. Reverend, thank you for your time here on PM Express. Hello, Reverend Fayose. Reverend Cyril Fayose is the General Secretary of the Christian Council of Ghana. Hello, Reverend.
Hello.
Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you for joining us here on PM Express. I mean, let me ask you at the Christian Council, what has been your role in the building of the National Cathedral, if any?
Our role has not been a direct one. It has been an indirect one. As you know, the whole National Cathedral vision is that of the president with the support of the churches. So after the initial processes, of course, the churches were rolled on board, and the churches have been supporting it as much as they can. But the Christian Council, as an organization, has not been directly involved. We also lend our support through our member churches. Our member churches are heeding the call for contributions from a minimum of 100 cedis per month by members, and then contributions from denominations and so on. So our members are supporting the project in that respect, but the support has been more indirect than directly.
Okay, so I see the Christian Council then as coordinating the contributions from member churches. And does this happen every Sunday with the 100 CDs in churches?
We don't actually have that locus to be able to collect the monies from members. We don't organize it or manage it.
Okay.
So the individual denominations do that on their own. In fact, what happened was that the National Cathedral trustees or committee gave some quotas to the various denominations, and some are meeting it, some are below par, some are above it. So that is what is happening. But it's done at the church level,
Okay.
not at the Christian council level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, give me a sense. I mean, you are the Christian Council, and what was the brief when this concept was suggested about how was going to be funded? Was it going to be funded mainly through Christian community contributions?
Well, this, let me put it this way, that it has been evolving. The initial position had been that this is the initiative of the president. It is his own pledge to God that he was going to build a cathedral. But then a cathedral must be run by the church. So he naturally roped the church in. The initial position was also that the government was going to help us with land, and then the church would take it up from there. But as things rolled on, we realized that it was maybe too much for the church, and the project was stalling. So the government put in some funds. So that is where we are right now. But the churches, through the able leadership of Professor Apostle Pokujina, have been mobilizing a lot of funds for the project. But, you know, COVID also affected all of this. So we have not been able to raise enough funds to build it ourselves. And I believe that may be the reason why some funding is coming from government.
Okay. So that offers clarity that the fundraising from the churches hasn't yielded the amounts that you were expecting.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And why is that, would you say? I mean, why do you think that is?
As I said, you know, when COVID came around, the churches were shut down for a number of months, and then we reopened gradually. Even though we went online and had collections, the offering online, it was still not enough. It was not the same as the in-person service. So it affected, like many other institutions, the church financially. And so that is primarily the reason why I think the contributions towards the building of the National Cathedral from member churches also wasn't the best.
Okay. So you understand when government then decides to then take up the mantle. I mean, what's your take on that? That has been at the core of the issues the public have had. You understand, you accept that it's okay for government to take the mantle?
Well, you know, this is the baby of the government and the president. We should not lose sight of that very important part of this whole process. Even though the churches had willingly come on board, it is still dear to the heart of the president and the government. So if things are not moving on well, they may support. I think what is really important, I don't think there's anything wrong if government supports a religious activity. And I know that in the past, previous governments have supported religious activities severally. What is important is if government does so to come clean, to put everything on the table, and let the whole world know that this is what government is doing to help Christians or to help the nation in its quest for the divine. And we do that in several other ways. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But they must just come clean. So I'm happy at least the Minister of Finance has come out to announce that this is what the government is doing. Let us be transparent about some of these things, and there will be no problem.
Are you happy with the level of transparency around the monies that have been released so far? Are you happy with it?
Well, I wasn't really in the know until this whole thing was leaked to us, or we were informed of the fact that the government. In fact, I had attended a meeting of the National Cathedral where matters were explained to us about the importance of the cathedral for the development of the nation and also for tourism purposes and so on. That I was convinced that if we cannot raise the money as member churches or churches to build a cathedral, why not take some monies from like petroleum funds, for instance, the heritage funds, as we did with some other projects in the country, build it as an investment and recoup the interest back into the fund. I thought something like that was possible until I heard that actually the government was putting some funding into it. So it is not bad if the government supports the project, but they must let the public know. It shouldn't be done under the carpet.
What do you say to the argument that the timing is wrong? We are in an economic crisis. We have flooding. Ghanaians are suffering with hardships and inflation. For a country in this current crisis, this is a wrong priority because it's going to cost us 350 million. What do you say to that, the priority question?
Yeah, that is a very difficult one to answer. If you ask me in the order of things, what will be my priorities at this material moment, the cathedral may not be at the top of the list. That if you ask me a personal question, or if I were to be the person in government or the persons managing this economy, maybe the cathedral will not be priority number one right now. But I'm not the one in government. I'm not the one managing the economy. And they may have their priorities. And it will be difficult from where I sit to say, well, they shouldn't have those priorities. Their priorities are wrong.
I mean, considering that this was being built as a cathedral and the Christian community was central to it, it has dragged Christendom into the center of this controversy. I wonder whether, of course, you made the point that the cathedral wouldn't be your top priority, but government is doing it nonetheless. The government is doing it in the name of Christendom, on all our behalf as Christians. Will the Christian Council be minded to engage with the government at this time when there's a lot of concern about the hardship, on taking a second look at the timing and the prioritization of it over other things?
Yeah. Well, that is a possibility that we can do. But let me also remind all of us that, like you rightly pointed out, somehow it is being done in the name of the church. And the church, if you like, has been dragged into it, to use your words. But the fact still remains that the Christian Council and the persons who are managing the building of the cathedral, the trustees, are not different. I don't know if you are getting my point.
Sorry, use the word again. They are not?
They are not different.
Okay.
There's a very thin line between them.
Yes.
Because most of our heads of churches are the trustees of the cathedral. So in effect, it is the Christian Council of Ghana, member churches and other churches that are sort of constructing this cathedral on behalf of the government. But there's still that opportunity to have engagement with the government if we think maybe we are prioritizing wrongly. Those same leaders should sit at the table and have that engagement with the government in power.
So I hear you saying that the members on the board of trustees who are leaders and heads of the various denominations should engage government on the prioritization and the issues that you raised.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, and I know many of them are your friends and colleagues. Have you directly made this representation to them?
It is an issue that we have discussed over and over and over again at various levels and at various meetings. So I think they'll do the needful at the right time.
Okay. So in other words, trustees, please engage government to reconsider the priority they placed on this at this time and the amount of money they are willing to commit to this at this time. That's what you want them to do.
Yes.
Okay. Please stay with me briefly. I have your colleague here with me, Bishop, who has also joined us with his thoughts on all this very important conversation. Bishop Fred Kranchi Mensah, he's the presiding bishop and general overseer of the Transformation Assembly Church. You've heard the Christian Council boss. I guess you're a member of the Christian Council?
No, I'm not.
You're not? Okay, great. But that's his view there. He agrees with you that if you ask him, this won't be his top priority. And he says, let's engage the government on changing the priority, making this a priority. What do you say?
Evans, every well-meaning Christian or clergy who reads the Bible and understands the Bible and applies the Bible will tell you that God is concerned about people more than buildings. All right? So, as I said from the beginning, now in this dispensation, human beings are the temple of God. So if we will want to build a temple for God, we should focus on people. What's the point? People's houses are flooding. And how I don't even have the heart to receive this cathedral whilst I see people struggling. When it rains, some people don't sleep. They have to stand upright till the next morning to deal with the flood. These are things we should focus on. God is pleased with things like that. With or without National Cathedral, the church will still function and play its role in terms of national development. So it's not as if we don't get it, we can't survive. It's absolutely not a priority. I agree with him. So I think, just as he said, we should come back to the drawing board and restructure this well. It's okay if you miss the mark and you come back to make corrections. Let's re-strategize.
Let me ask you, you say the timing is wrong. So if not now, when?
At a stage in our development, when our social systems are strong, when our economy is thriving, when people don't have to stand up every year through the night when it's raining, then we can think about something like a national cathedral. If God says, build me a cathedral because I want to live in a cathedral, then what we will eat, we should use that to build. God has not asked us to build him a cathedral. It's a personal interest. It's not bad, like I said. It's okay. We should support it if we are there yet. But we are not there. There is an argument that there are other nations who have built cathedrals, but the point is that at what stage of their development did they build? We should ask ourselves that question.
Adam Senanu, so the transparency question, the General Secretary of the Christian Council was clear on this, that the government need to be transparent. He said the word is come clean. You are an anti-corruption campaigner. Are you happy with the transparency surrounding the level of transparency surrounding the construction of the cathedral so far?
No, I really am not. And I think that part of the difficulty is the changing social contract. In my mind, if they recognize that the monies coming in through the churches was not enough to build what they had in mind, they either scale down or they find another way outside depending on the resources of citizens, because that was the social contract. So I will certainly not accept the thinking that it is okay if government suddenly decided to put a lot more money in when that discussion had not been had with Ghanaians. We cannot support that, certainly not me as a Christian. I think that that's an issue of integrity. You made a commitment that you do it in a particular way. If it is shifting, you don't go behind and change the formula and say, therefore, I shall raise more money from the citizens through whichever way. I think that is unacceptable. So if, based on what Reverend Fayose is saying is the current status, that the money is being received and not enough, then let's go back to the drawing board. If we want to change the original contract, we need to come back and find out whether the people are willing to go down that route. If they are not, you can't do that. And it clearly shows that if I don't know that these are the changes why all of a sudden we are having certain monies released, obviously transparency and accountability has not been up to the level that all of us would have desired. So certainly not. And I would like to appeal to Prof and the team, some of the very finest we have, that they need to take the bull by the horn. They need to ensure that at this point we have full accountability on what has come in, where we are, and what decisions are going to be taken moving forward. In my mind, you either scale down. There's no need to rush. If it's something that some members of the Christian community can put some money in, do what is possible. Otherwise, you've got to make sure that the citizens and the kind of context we find ourselves where we have flooding, we have issues, those are priorities that ought to be taken on board. We cannot be moving those funds into an issue of a national cathedral at this point.
Reverend Fayose, finally, considering the funding challenges that we have now with the cathedral, and the current economic challenges, should the cathedral project be put on hold, at least until we are clear how we're going to fund it and raise enough?
I think that is a question that Apostle Opoku-Onyina and the trustees of the National Cathedral will be in a better position to respond to. I think, as Mr. Senadu pointed out, we must come back to the drawing table. Let us look at the funds that are coming. If we need support, even from government, let us adduce reasons why that support should come into the cathedral funding. Yeah. So that will be where I'll take it from. I think the trustees are very, very capable men of God, heads of denominations and churches. So I would, as we have already said, they should tell us the exact position where we are, and if necessary, re-engage with the government on whether the cathedral should be put on hold, construction should be put on hold, or we should proceed.
And it will now cost us 350 million, according to the finance minister when he spoke on Sunday. Can the Christian community raise the bulk? Can you raise that money? That, by the way, is 2.8 billion cedis.
Yeah, that will be a tough one, but I think it's possible.
Okay.
To God, all things are possible.
Okay. You agree? It's possible?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You see, Evans, if God wants a temple, he will build it himself.
And I'm saying, to man, by the way.
I'm saying, yes, he will make a way.
Okay.
I'm saying this because I have friends. I know people who have single-handedly built temples for their churches.
True.
As I sit here, a couple of weeks ago, one member of our church gave me a check for the ministry to build as a temple. One person. There are people who love God. There are people who want to serve God. This concept should be sold well to the Christian community. Okay. I'm telling you, there are one denomination can take this upon itself and build it.
The evidence is littered, right? We have Christian churches with buildings that really look modern and ultra-modern.
And the reason they are not contributing as they should is because we have not caught the vision.
But if you look at the people in the trustees, almost the powerful churches, the richest churches, of course, Reverend Pastor Otabil has resigned now, but those are the churches with the muscle. They've shown.
Evans, may I ask you a question? If I have the right to. Why do you think Dr. Mensa Otabil resigned?
It's a big question, honestly. I have no idea, but it begs a lot.
I think we need to review this. I'm telling you, Evans, if we go to our churches with the men on the board, very credible Christian leaders, like my brother said, they are the finest we have. If they can sell the vision to us well, follow the model of David, sell the vision well, I'm telling you, the Christian community is up to this task.
Okay. Reverend, thank you very much. Bishop Fred Crunchy Mensah, Dr. Cyril Fayose, General Secretary of the Christian Council, I'm grateful. Adam Senano, Chairman Advocates for Christ. Thank you also. We'll see. At least now we've heard from the Christian Council what their thoughts are on this. Let's see if the trustees take up the challenge as they've been thrown to now to get the clarity, get the transparency, and possibly encourage government to reconsider the project, either to put it on hold or find alternative sources other than burdening the taxpayer. Enjoy the rest of your evening.